Gavir, the wider agenda, which has been to expand the settlements in the West Bank and to take control of Gaza, and that Netanyahu is ultimately putting his own self-interest before the interests of Israel. What is your response to it? I mean, I presume you read it, but what's your response?
Well, first, we have to remember who invented Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, and that was the Palestinian leaders. By rejecting the Clinton-Barak offer in 2001 and the Olmert offer in 2007, which would have given the Palestinians a complete state on the West Bank and in the Gaza, 96% of the West Bank, 4% of Israel, they turned it down. And as a result of that, they encouraged the development of the right wing in Israel. I have no brief at all for Ben-Gvir and Smotrich. I've met them both. I don't like them. I think they are undercutting peace, but they don't speak for Israelis. The Israelis want peace. The Israelis wanted a two-state solution in 2000, 2001. Bill Clinton said over and over again, they could have had it. And once you turn down a two-state solution the way they did in 2001, don't expect you'll be offered it again. You're going to move a country away from peace if you reject it. And then if you do, October 7th, you're going to strengthen the right wing. It's just inevitable. And so the large fault for why the Israelis have moved to electing people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir lies completely with Hamas and the Palestinian leaders. I'm not saying the Palestinian people deserve this, but they certainly have to look at their own leadership and say, my God, if we had accepted two states in 1948, 1967, and 2000, 2001, 2007, look where we would be today instead of where they are.
Mehdi, your response?
Israelis have no agency, apparently, according to Alan Dershowitz. Everything is the fault of the Palestinians. So many falsehoods in there. There was no Palestinian state offered in 1967. That's when Israel began its illegal occupation of the West Bank and Gaza. And even if we buy this nonsense that Clinton and Barak
How about
offered...
1948?
I didn't interrupt you when you were speaking.
1948?
Can I say my point? You've said all your falsehoods. Now I'm going to debunk them. You said that Clinton and Barak offered a state. Not true. At Camp David, both sides turned down the deal. Shlomo Ben-Ami, who was the foreign minister, said, I wouldn't have taken that deal at Camp David, the Israeli foreign minister. Then Taba came along, and Taba fell apart because Barak went to the polls and lost the elections. Ehud Barak lost the elections. He was a lame duck prime minister. Sharon came in. So you can rewrite history all you want. No one believes that's the case. But even if you were telling the truth, which you're not, let's talk about today. Benjamin Netanyahu brags that he's blocked a two-state solution. The guy who you volunteered to be a lawyer for in front of the International Criminal Court, wanted war crime suspect, has openly bragged that I blocked a two-state solution. His words, I blocked a two-state solution. So you can rewrite history all you want. The present day is proof that you're talking nonsense. This Israeli government, this far-right government, has no interest in peace with the Palestinians, only interested in ethnic cleansing. And the best part of listening to you speak about agency, everything you said could be said about Hamas and the Palestinians. The Palestinians would say Hamas is a result of Israelis not giving us our freedom. Hamas is a result of Israelis besieging and boycotting Gaza for decades on end. Hamas is a result of Israeli leadership coming and killing our leaders and imprisoning our leaders. So the same arguments you use to defend genocidal fascists in the Israeli government could be used to defend Hamas.
And the point I would make, Alan, you can respond to what Mehdi just said in a moment, but the point I would make about Netanyahu, bringing it back to him, is that he didn't have to form a government with Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. He knew what they were like. He knew they were far more to the right than he instinctively was. I don't believe he felt that they represented the wishes of the Israeli people. But I think he also is power mad, and I think that he realised the only way he could get power back was if he did a deal with the devil in this case being Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. And the interesting thing now politically is whether he is building up, and it's slow momentum, but there's a bit of momentum from where he was, but whether Likud could now win an election without these far-right guys. So my question for you would be, I don't think we should give Netanyahu a pass because he got into bed with these guys very willingly. It was his way of getting power.
And staying out of prison.
In other words, you say Netanyahu is a politician in addition to being a statesman. He wanted to win the election because he thought winning the election would be best for Israel, best for his people, and best for world peace. And so he was prepared to make the kinds of compromises that every coalition government makes. I was actually in Israel when he was forming his government, and I met with Smotrich, I met with Ben-Gvir. I urged Netanyahu not to include them in the coalition, but he wouldn't have been prime minister. Who knows what would have happened if that hadn't happened. But remember as well, too, you talk about that the Palestinians were never offered a state. The UN offered them a state in 1948, 1947, the Peer Commission, 1938. The Palestinians don't know how to take yes for an answer. And Bill Clinton put it very well. He said Hamas, and he spoke really about the Palestinians, don't want a state. They want there not to be a Jewish state. Palestinianism, the focus on the Palestinians, as distinguished from focused on many other groups in the world that deserve statehood, the focus on Palestinianism is destruction. Bill Clinton says Hamas does not want a state. It just wants to kill Jews and kill Israelis. Now, how do we move forward from this? What we move forward from this is Hamas accepts the Israeli peace offer, which they have now rejected. Let's get the hostages back. Let's make peace. Let's have a process which could conceivably lead to a two-state solution. Look, I don't blame Netanyahu for saying you can't have a two-state solution now. You can't have a state where on its border you have Hamas running Gaza, where they've sworn to do October 7th again and again and again and again and again. You can't have that kind of a state. So we all hope the goal is a two-state solution. The goal is to get rid of Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, but the Palestinians have to come to the bargaining table legitimately, end the war, return the hostages, and then we can move forward.
Okay, yeah. Before I let Mehdi respond to that, and he will, my response to that would be, for the same reason that you can't let Hamas have power going forward because they are wedded to the destruction of Israel, in the same way, you could argue now, I think pretty clearly, that the Israeli government, the current one, is wedded to the total destruction of Gaza. And in fact, in Smotrich, out of his own mouth came a plan to cleanse the Strip completely of Palestinians. So, there's not much difference here in terms of the intent or rhetoric. Certainly from people like Smotrich. And then it comes down to, well, what influence do they have? And everyone tries to downplay it, but the New York Times makes it crystal clear that big deals have been on the table and Smotrich has refused to countenance them and has threatened to bring down the government if it goes ahead.
Well, there is a big difference between Hamas, which murders innocent people and babies and children, and Israel, which defends itself against such actions.
Now, but Israel is killing so many. Smotrich, yeah, but Alan, we've had this conversation.
But Israel is now.
Israel is losing.
Not a single.
I know, but Israel's losing people like me. Right, and many like me who had a lot of support for Israel's right to defend itself
I agree with that.
Because of the sheer volume of innocent children in particular that are being slaughtered on a daily basis. Now, it's an arguable point
it doesn't
whether
even
everything
compare.
the IDF is doing is intentional or not. They say none of it's intentional, but they are killing a staggering number of children in the process of going after Hamas.
Let's just remember one point. One of the greatest days in American history is June 6, 1944, the greatest generation. They killed so many more civilians in the process of ending Nazism. Another great day was VJ Day. I was old enough to remember it. They killed 100,000 or more civilians. Israel is doing far, far less than the United States and Great Britain did. When your people are endangered, when your children are murdered and your women are raped, then you do engage in actions. And particularly, remember, in England and in the United States, the enemy wasn't hiding among civilians, whereas Hamas brags about the fact that its civilians are martyrs. We want them to die. The goal, the tactic of Hamas is let's get Israel to kill as many civilians as possible, 50,000, 60,000, and then we can get Piers Morgan to turn against them. That's their goal. They are targeting you, and you're accepting it because that's their goal. And I don't blame you. Good people support Hamas, or at least oppose Israel, because they don't understand that all these deaths are the result. No, I'm not saying that. I say good people do. Some people do. The people who march in New York or oppose Israel because they don't fully understand the tactic of Hamas to kill as many.
No, I understand that. Okay, I want to go to Mehdi. I want to go to Mehdi. Alan, I fully understand the tactic of Hamas. What I don't understand...
No, I understand
What
that.
I don't understand are the current tactics of the Israeli government, which seem to be not a lot better. Mehdi, your response?
I mean, I don't know what to respond to. So
they
much
are
was
like
said,
that.
and so much nonsense there was said about violence and killings by someone, as I say, who's volunteered to defend Netanyahu at the International Criminal Court, where he's been indicted with the former Israeli defense minister for war crimes.
I'm proud of that.
And crimes
I'm
against
proud of
humanity.
that.
Of course you're proud of it, because you don't value Palestinian life. Let's just deal with some things you said. Number one, you talked about deals and negotiations. Gershon Baskin, who is the only Israeli negotiator to have ever successfully negotiated with Hamas, keeps saying, he said it just the other day, go check his Twitter feed, that he has communications from Hamas saying, we have offered the Israeli government a full ceasefire. We will leave government. We will not govern Gaza. We will return all the hostages in return for a permanent ceasefire. Israel doesn't want a permanent ceasefire because Smotrich and others want 60 days and then they go back to the killing when the hostages are released. He's offered a permanent end to the war. Israel doesn't want a permanent end to the war. That's what Baskin is saying. Secondly, you talk about killing of kids.
I would like that.
You talk about killing of kids. I mean, the Israeli military does intentionally kill
Deliberate,
children.
deliberate
Let's read
killing of
let's
kids.
read 972. Israeli publication interviewed 7 Israeli soldiers and officers, peers, who returned from Gaza. Just last week, in several cases, the soldier said, Israeli troops deliberately targeted children. There was a boy who entered the zone. He didn't do anything. Other soldiers claimed to have seen him standing, talking to people. That's it.
And
they
get
dropped a grenade from a drone. In another incident, soldiers tried to kill a child riding a bicycle.
And they get prosecuted
So
for
they
it.
have not been prosecuted, Alan. Don't lie on television where people can
Yes,
fact
they
you.
have
None of them have been
Yes,
prosecuted.
they have been.
Which
I
soldier?
know they have been.
Which soldier was
Yes, they have
prosecuted
been.
for dropping a grenade on a child?
There are dozens
You're
of
lying
them who,
on national TV.
Dozens
Piers
have been
Morgan can come
prosecuted.
back on the next episode and tell everyone that
you'll
you're not
see
telling the truth.
Dozens of them have been prosecuted.
Not a single
for
Israeli
going and
soldier has been
exceeding
prosecuted
orders.
for deliberately killing a Palestinian
That's
child. That is a
false.
lie. A demonstrable lie. Everyone
That's
watching right now.
false.
on
No,
YouTube.
that's false.
hang on,
They
hang on,
have
hang on.
been
I'm sorry, you
prosecuted.
can't say things.
Okay,
And they've been investigated.
hang on.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, Alan, what Mehdi is saying is that no Israeli soldier has been prosecuted for deliberately
That's a
killing
fact.
a Palestinian child since this war began. Is your information different to that?
Absolutely different. I know for a fact because I was involved in the negotiations with the International Criminal Court, and I arranged for Khan to come to Israel and see the evidence of what has been done, how people have been prosecuted, how the Israeli legal system has been,
No one's been prosecuted. You're
responsive.
lying.
So I have all the data and all the information.
Name them. Come back on this show and
of
name
course
those soldiers.
It's true that they've been prosecuted.
Come back on this show, Alan, and
So
name
the
those soldiers. I
name-
challenge you. Now, I'll finish my point.
I'm
You
happy to
interrupted
do
me.
that.
Hold on. You interrupted me. I never interrupted you. You've interrupted me twice now on this show.
No, I didn't interrupt you.
You did, actually. You interrupted to make false
Well, I
claims.
did ask Alan a question.
Well,
after
let me
what you
finish
said.
my point. Actually, my second point, Piers, was to you. I dealt with the Gershon Baskin and the deliberate killing of kids. They just killed 6 kids queuing up for
I was
water
about to talk about
yesterday.
that.
They killed 9 kids queuing up for nutritional
They
supplements last week.
acknowledge-
Stop
they
interrupting, Alan. Everyone can see you do
accident
it.
And it's under
Stop
investigation.
interrupting,
It's
Alan.
under
Otherwise, I'll do it to
investigation.
you, and you really won't like it. Piers, let me make my point to you that I'm trying to make. You mentioned the New York Times. I'm glad you've mentioned the New York Times several times. The New York Times piece, the long piece, has a lot in there. 2 important points for you, Piers. I've been coming on this show for over a year talking to you about Gaza. Last April and July, the New York Times reports that Netanyahu's own generals told him, there's no military strategy left. There's nothing more we can do. Stop this war. Netanyahu overrode them. So when I was on this show and you were telling me, of course, they're just defending themselves. What else should they be doing? At that time, when I was on this show, Piers, generals were telling Netanyahu there's no war left to be had. They also make it very clear in this piece that the government would have fallen apart had Netanyahu not prolonged the war because he wanted to avoid prosecution. And I'm sorry that we needed the New York Times to say that, because I was saying that on this show to you, Piers. Many people were saying that this war is about Netanyahu trying to avoid prison. This is about Netanyahu trying to avoid prison. I know Alan is an expert on criminals. He's defended some of the worst criminals in the world.
Lawyers do defend criminals.
Well, he defends some of the worst people. Epstein, Netanyahu.
Yeah, but lawyers...
No one forced him to defend these
lawyers
people.
Some of the best.
Piers, no one forced him to go volunteer to defend Benjamin Netanyahu.
You can't make aspersions against lawyers.
I can actually.
I
can say you don't need. You don't need to.
It's not very credible to do that.
Really?
Lawyers do their job.
Hold on, Piers. Somebody forced Alan Dershowitz to defend Netanyahu. He said he's proud to do it. No one forced him to do it.
Which criminal should he defend?
I'm proud to do it.
You're proud to defend Benjamin Netanyahu.
He was a criminal lawyer.
You're proud to defend Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump,
represent
Jeffrey Epstein. You defend the worst people in the world.
I was proud.
Okay.
Yes. And I was proud to defend Bill Clinton, and I was proud to defend Ted Kennedy.
Right.
I've defended people, and I've also defended Palestinians who were charged with offenses in Israel. I've also defended Palestinian students at Harvard who wanted to put up a Palestinian flag.
Have you defended Netanyahu's corruption trial? I think you've only defended his war crimes.
But you know what, Mehdi? I do think it's a very lame.
I've been involved in his corruption trial too.
It's a very. I've always felt, and a lot of people try this with Alan Dershowitz, because there are lots of things you can argue with Alan about what he believes. But when people go ad hominem about him being a lawyer defending bad
Piers,
people...
Well, I'm going to respond now since both come
most criminal lawyers I've ever met at some stage defend pretty
Piers,
dodgy
I want
people.
You, Piers, look
it's
at that
their job, literally their job.
We're looking at our cameras. Look at your camera and say honestly that you would say to Saddam Hussein's lawyer or Slobodan Milosevic's lawyer, Vladimir Putin's lawyer, you wouldn't say a word about people who choose in the West to go defend those people? Yes, you would. It's just you give Netanyahu a pass. I see him in the same league as Saddam Hussein, Vladimir Putin, Slobodan Milosevic. If a Westerner chooses to go defend these people, no one forced him to. I'm going to question their moral judgment.
Do they have a right to defend?
Of course they have a right to a defence.
Then they should have a right.
But no one forced.
Well, hang on. Then they should have a right to have a lawyer defending them.
Of course.
You understand that?
Understood.
That's how the legal system works.
So if a British
justice
hold
works.
on, Piers. If a British lawyer volunteered to go defend Putin, you wouldn't cast any moral aspersions on them. Don't lie, Piers. You know you would.
So just to be clear, who should Alan be defending? Give me some criminal names.
People in New York, people wherever he lives.
Which criminals?
Why does he have to go defend Netanyahu?
Give me some names.
Hold on. Why does he have to go defend Netanyahu?
I do have.
I think it's a crazy attack.
I look at vile people and I wonder, why would you volunteer to go defend that person?
Because they're lawyers. Anyway, let's move on to the more substantive part of this. So, I mean, Alan, this incident that Mehdi referenced, the strike on a water distribution point at a Gaza refugee camp that killed 10 people, including 6 children, wounded 17 more. The IDF said it intended to hit an Islamic Jihad militant, but a technical error caused the missile to miss its target. But, having technical errors that wipe out 6 kids in a refugee camp at this stage of this war.
Terrible.
And these stories are coming every day now. How does this end?
War is hell, and these kinds of accidents happen all the time. Many Israelis have been killed by Israeli-friendly fire. Many, including a relative of mine who was killed by friendly fire. Accidents happen. Israelis immediately announced that they would investigate, and if warranted, it might have been a pure accident, but if warranted, there'll be prosecution. Israel prosecutes its own criminals, and it does it all the time. And of course, Hamas rewards them. The Palestinian Authority pays terrorists to kill, pay for slay. There's an enormous difference. The United States government had many cases of accidental killings during every war we fought. And the difference between a democracy and a tyranny is that in a democracy, you investigate. And you investigate.
Adam, before I go back to Mehdi, just on a profound level, I ask you this question. In what way is it remotely proportionate that Israel has now killed anything between 70 and 100,000 people on the Palestinian side, of which, let's say a quarter, maybe a third are Hamas terrorists? We don't know. But let's say that is the proportion of that number that have been killed, which means maybe 60,000 civilians have been killed. In what way is that remotely proportionate to an attack that killed 1,200 people, of which I think 800 were civilians, and wounded many more, and kidnapped 250. It's so disproportionate now that what concerns me about this, if I'm an Israeli, a moderate Israeli, so not a far-right Israeli or an extremist or any of these things, I'm just an average Israeli citizen watching what my government is doing in Gaza now and seeing the fury that is building around the world to this daily slaughter. This is terrible for Israel. It's terrible for Israel's reputation. I think it's dangerous.
I agree.
It's dangerous for Jewish people. I think that the rising tide of anti-Semitism was despicable when it happened in the aftermath of October the 7th. It highlighted a cancer in the world, that people would react to that attack by being openly anti-Semitic towards Jewish people. But now a lot of that anti-Semitism, I'm sure, is being fueled by what is happening in Gaza. And I think, so I feel for Jewish people too. So I just, to me, none of this makes any sense now. You agree?
Well, of course it doesn't make, yes, and that's why Hamas is winning. Hamas is succeeding. Hamas set out to turn the world against Israel, and they realized that if they murdered 1,200 people, kidnapped people, there would be a reaction. And then they went further, and they hid themselves beneath mosques and schools, and they generated the kind of killing that results in good people like you changing your mind about Israel. That's Hamas's strategy. Hamas is winning. Hamas prevailed on
my
October
point is
7th,
Israel is
and it's
losing.
going to repeat it over and over again.
I think Israel is losing in the court of public opinion. There are
That's
many,
my point. I agree with you.
Yeah.
That's my point.
But then the strategy
Hamas
is losing.
Winning. Israel. Well,
stop
what's
the war.
the alternative? The alternative is to let. No, of course, let's stop the war, and Israel has offered to do it. Just today,
That's not true.
Israel put an offer on the table that
not
has been
stopped it. They've
rejected.
asked for
The
60
point that I
days.
want to make, let me just finish my point. The point I want to make is Hamas had a strategy. We know there are capture documents that say it. That is, get Israel to kill as many Palestinian civilians as possible, and it will turn Piers Morgan against Israel because he's a good and decent person. And the good and decent people in the world on college campuses will turn against Israel. That's Hamas's strategy. We can't let it prevail
Well,
because if we do, they'll do it over and over and over again.
Alan, just to be clear, I haven't turned against Israel. I've turned against the current. I want to be very specific because people love to throw around these phrases.
I agree with you. I apologize. I agree.
I've become increasingly critical of the Israeli government strategy in Gaza. That's my specific position. I'm not against Israel or Israelis or Jewish people. When people conflate it, I think it's really disingenuous. All right, Mehdi.
So, a few things.
I agree with you, and I apologize for any implication to the opposite. But that has been the strategy.
Okay, well,
they're prevailing, and we can't let that strategy succeed.
Alan, that is always the terrorist strategy. It was the strategy of Al-Qaeda. It was the strategy of ISIS. So
that's right.
Yeah, but
that's right. And the United States overreacted too.
Right, let me get Mehdi's response. Mehdi.
So, a lot was said there again. Yeah. Let me try and respond. It's insane to suggest that Israel has accidentally killed 17,000 children. Anyone who says that should be laughed off television, whether they're a professor of law or not. 17,000 people were not killed accidentally. The children who were killed in a waterline were not killed accidentally. The children lining up, 9 who were killed last Thursday for nutritional supplements, as UNICEF says, outrageously for UNICEF aid, were not killed accidentally. Children who were shot in the head by snipers were not killed accidentally. I have friends of mine, doctors, who have gone out to Gaza and have come back and said, we saw kids were brought to hospital with sniper shots, bullets to the head, to the chest. Multiple American doctors have said that. Feroz Sidwa, Mark Perlmutter, Irfan Galaria. Go Google it if people don't believe me. So it's nonsense. Israel is killing kids deliberately, has done so for the last 21, 22, whatever so months. You can't push this bullshit line anymore about people were hiding under hospitals.
Do you disagree?
We've seen it on tape, Piers.
Okay,
we've seen kids killed in cold blood on tape. You've seen it. I've seen it.
Do you disagree? Do you disagree with what Alan said, that this was Hamas's deliberate strategy?
I don't know what Hamas's deliberate strategy was.
And
if it was, by the way, Piers,
hang on, let me finish the question. They created a vast tunnel network in which they hid, but left the civilian population to be slaughtered. So, in other words, I think it's perfectly rational to agree with what Alan said about the Hamas strategy.
Yeah, but hold on. What's interesting is, and as you pointed this out, why do it then? If we all know that's the strategy, no one forced Israel to go kill 100,000 people, just like, the Vietnam, the US, we burned the village to save it. No one forced Israel to drop 2,000-pound bombs on crowded refugee places. No one forced Israel to bomb hospitals. No one forced Israel to sniper shoot children. No one forced Israel to kill women holding up white flags, as we saw on tape with our own lying eyes. No one forced Israel to do any of that, which is why Karim Khan, the chief prosecutor, which is why the ICC judges all said Netanyahu and Gallant need to face war crimes charges.
A corrupt prosecutor.
Theodore, hold on, just to be clear on this. I know this propaganda is coming from. Theodore Myron, who is a former chair of the International Tribunal on Yugoslavia, former Rwanda tribunal judge, former legal advisor to the Israeli Foreign Ministry, former Israeli ambassador. Theodore Myron, 94 years old, descendant of Holocaust survivors. He advised on that indictment and said, yes, Netanyahu should be indicted on the basis of all the evidence I've seen. He knows far more about war crimes than you do. And let me finish my other point. Piers, you keep saying...
No,
yes,
he
does, actually.
I know him.
Well, you haven't chaired an international... Alan, you have not chaired an international tribunal on war crimes in Yugoslavia. He did.
This issue.
So,
I've written books about it.
Great.
I've written a new book
He actually
about
prosecuted
it.
war criminals, and he's not corrupt.
Crimes.
He's a Holocaust survivor. He's a 94-year-old Israeli-American Jew.
It doesn't mean he knows more about war crimes than Alan does.
Yes, he does, actually. Somebody who's prosecuted war crimes, Piers
disagree.
does. And let me finish my other point, because both of you always interrupt me. Piers, one point you've said earlier about Israeli civilians, members of the public. You said moderate Israelis. You said earlier, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir don't represent Israelis. I wish that were true. I wish it was. But the Israeli
Well, you're going to cite that poll with 80%. But
I'm going to cite multiple polls, right?
Well, that one is a bit of an outlier.
Well, the Penn State, there are multiple polls, Piers. I can cite you 3 or 4. My colleague Diana Budo has written about it for Zeteo. There is a Penn State poll that shows 82% of Israeli Jews say they support ethnic cleansing in Gaza. 47% of them said they support killing every man, woman, and child in every city that's taken back from Gaza, a la the Bible punishments of the Old Testament. So Israeli society is super pro the war, super pro getting rid of Palestinians from Israel. So unfortunately, we can't lay all this at Netanyahu's door and just say it's all the fault of Netanyahu. If we got rid of Netanyahu, things would be fine. Actually, the Israeli opposition is super genocidal. The Israeli parliament's trying to get rid of the only leading Palestinian member right now. The Israeli public is
telling what percentage of Hamas are supported by the Palestinian people?
Quite a lot right now, because they see them as resistance. Yeah. I'm glad you read the whole...
Hang on. So in other words, you see the same problem on the other side.
I do see some problem. Let me make this point. Hold on. No, it's not, because you never let me finish a sentence. One side is the occupier.
Responding to what you said.
One side is the occupier. The other side is occupied. One side is the people fighting for their freedom. One side is the people denying them the freedom. But let me finish a point. It's very interesting that you mentioned about different attitudes. All I've heard on the show since it began today is poor Israelis, think about the Israelis. Alan has said multiple times now, if your people were killed and if your women were raped, then you would respond like this. Well, the Palestinians would say the same, because that's what's happened to them. Alan said, war is hell. If somebody came on the show, Piers, and said to you after October the 7th, Alan, stop interrupting, Alan, let me speak. You've spoken the most on the show. Let me speak.
When was there a 7-Eleven?
Piers, 7-Eleven is the name of the store.
Tell me when there was a 7-Eleven.
Piers, if somebody came on the show after October 7th and said to you, well, 1,500 people were killed in Israel, war is hell, would you be okay with that answer? You wouldn't be. So let's not tolerate it from supporters of Israel, please. Let's be consistent in our morality.
Okay.
Because that was a deliberate.
Okay. So is your favourite man Netanyahu's killing of children.
I think the problem, Alan, with where Israel's got itself with the government and the IDF at the moment, is that it appears to most people outside of the IDF and the Israeli government that there are a huge amount of children who are being killed on a daily basis. And this argument that none of it's deliberate gets increasingly tenuous.
We can see it. We can see it, Piers, with our own eyes.
I want to end, because we run out of time.
But it's true.
Well, we run out of time.
It's true.
Yes, our eyes are lying to us, Alan.
I want to end, Alan, by asking you about...
Let me make one point.
Yeah, very quickly, because I want to just finish on one other point, but go on.
Sure, but one point. What conceivable benefit would Israel ever get by killing civilian children?
Well, exactly.
They would do everything to avoid doing that.
I don't think they are,
want to do it. They're only doing it. They're bombing a hospital.
Have you listened to Israeli politicians? They brag about it, Alan. You can come on here and gaslight the Western public, but Israeli politicians say with their own mouths.
No Israeli politician
They say it with their own mouths, Alan. We've all heard them. We've all seen them say it. Not just Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, but Netanyahu, the Heritage Minister, the Social Equality Minister, the Deputy Speaker of Parliament who said burn down Gaza.
I will give $1,000. I will give $1,000 contribution to Hamas if you can find a quote directly from Netanyahu saying that we deliberately kill children.
Why not everyone else in his government?
No, you quoted.
Look at that, Alan. Look how scared you were. You won't give the quote for the entire Israeli government, will you?
But
go on, Alan. Will you say it for the Israeli government? I'll take your bet right now if you say it's for the Israeli government.
I don't think you can find a single person in the I don't think you can find a single person in the Israeli government, even Smotrich and even Ben-Gvir, who will get on this show and say, we deliberately kill children because we hate Palestinian children and we want them to die. That's just not true.
But you know
they do it because they use them as human shields.
We will destroy Gaza is what's
Hamas wants these children to die.
They can keep saying,
wants these children to die.
Yes, but you know what? Yeah. I don't think the Israeli government cares about the number of Palestinian children it's killing. I really don't. Because if they did,
I think they do.
They would now stop this war. That's my opinion. I want to end on something else.
They want to stop the war.
I want to end on. Well, I don't think they're trying hard enough. But look, we can disagree about that. I just want to play a clip. This is Tucker Carlson talking about the Epstein scandal. Let's take a look at this.
And I think the real answer is Jeffrey Epstein was working on behalf of intel services, probably not American. And we have every right to ask, on whose behalf was he working? Where did all the money come from? And no one has ever gotten to the bottom of that because no one has ever tried. And moreover, it's extremely obvious to anyone who watches that this guy had direct connections to a foreign government. Now, no one's allowed to say that that foreign government is Israel because we have been somehow cowed into thinking that that's naughty. There is nothing wrong with saying that. There is nothing hateful about saying that. There's nothing anti-Semitic about saying that. There's nothing even anti-Israel about saying that.
Okay, Alan, it's got a lot of pickup, this from
I was
Carlson.
Epstein's...
Yes, yeah.
I was Epstein's lawyer. I tried desperately to get him a good deal when he was first arrested. I went to the prosecution with everything we had. I asked Epstein over and over again, what can you tell me? Did you work for the government? Did you do anything for the government? If he had done anything for the government, first person he would have told would be me, and I would have gone to the government and say, well, you can't prosecute this guy. You have to let him off the hook. He's worked for the government. There isn't one iota of proof or truth to the claim that he worked for the Israeli government. Jeffrey Epstein visited me in Israel when I was there as a visiting scholar. It was the first time he had ever been to Israel. He asked me to put together a group of smart people to have lunch. I included Aaron Barak, Yitzhak Zamir, a few people. He didn't know anybody in Israel. He has never had any connections with Israeli intelligence. And Tucker Carlson just made it up completely out of whole cloth. There's nothing to it whatsoever.
And what you said has been corroborated by Naftali Bennett, the former Prime Minister, who said today... Well, corroborated in the sense of this defence has been corroborated. He said that Epstein had nothing to do with the Mossad ever, and never, in his knowledge, ever did any work for the Israeli government. Now, this is still being investigated. We shall see. But no one's, as Alan rightly says, no one's established this yet as a fact. To the contrary. Alan, before I go to Mehdi for a final response to this, you've been quite vocal since the Trump administration shut down the Epstein case. You've been quite vocal that you know specific names of people that, in your estimation, should be prosecuted. So my question for you is, why don't you just put them out in the public domain?
I can't, because I'm under court order. The courts, two courts in federal courts in New York, have imposed gag orders on this. I don't know anybody who necessarily should be prosecuted. I know the names of people who were allegedly clients or allegedly had sex, and those names are being suppressed because
how many names are we talking about?
And got, probably just a handful, maybe even fewer. But we know that there are some, and we know that some of the names that are being suppressed not only are names of people who are accused, but also information about the accusers, because some of the accusations are clearly false accusations. And so what I've said from day one is we want every single thing disclosed, nothing redacted, everything open, so that the public can judge the validity of the accusations, the name of the accusers, the names of the accused, and put it all forward so that the court of public opinion has all the information. There is no such thing as a client list. There is a redacted FBI form that has the names of several people, and they have been redacted, and they should be unredacted.
But that sounds very similar to a client list to me.
No, it's an accusation. No, it's not a list. A list would be something that Epstein put together. This is a list of people who were accused by somebody or by others of having improper conduct, and those names have been suppressed. That's not a list. That's a list of accusations. They may all be false as far as we know.
Okay.
And if you're going to turn out the names of the people accused, you also ought to provide all the information about the accusers.
And in all your time, Adam, before I go to Mehdi for the final word on this, in all your time around Epstein and this case and all your knowledge, has there been anything to link President Trump, Donald Trump, to anything that, in your eyes, ought to be further investigated?
Absolutely not. They knew each other. They were part of the Palm Beach Circle. They were at each other's homes. And then, apparently, Trump banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago. But there's never been an allegation that Trump did anything wrong. And I've never seen any evidence to suggest that period. The same thing is true of Bill Clinton. There were all kinds of allegations that he was on the plane, that he was on the island. That has never been proved. It's easy to make these accusations. I wrote a book a few years ago called Guilt by Accusation, where today in America and around the world, if you're accused, you're deemed to be guilty. But many of the people who were accused were not guilty. In my own case, I was accused, and the woman then admitted that she may have falsely, in fact, misidentified me for somebody else, and my case ended as a result of that, and other cases might end the same way if all the information came out. That's why I always wanted all the information to come out so that innocent people will be exculpated and guilty people will be
listen, I
prosecuted.
agree, and I think what's fascinating, Mehdi, is that this has been shut down without all that information being put out, which I just think purely on the face of that, that is wrong. But what we're also seeing is a political fallout, which is gathering real momentum and is quite dangerous for Donald Trump, I think, which a lot of the MAGA base are genuinely enraged that they've been effectively taken to the water edge of the oasis, thinking they're going to get all the answers and the accountability, and now they're going to get nothing.
Yeah, well said. This is the first Trump scandal I know of where the opposition to Trump is being led by his base, not by liberals, not by the left. Democrats have been very late to this story. It's his own people who are pissed at him. And as you say, look, there's only two options here. One is Trump and his crew lied to these people, made fools of them, brought them to the water's edge, as you say, tried to get votes off of a child abuse scandal, cynically, and then said, oh, there's nothing there is no file, even though Pam Bondi said it's sitting on my desk in February. Or there's the other scary scenario that Donald Trump, the President of the United States, is implicated in a child sex abuse scandal, which, of course, Elon Musk, his top donor, has said. He says Donald Trump's name is in the Epstein files. No less a figure than his top donor and former government ally has said that. So that's a pretty big scandal. Then you've got Alex Acosta, who was Trump's Labor secretary. He's the guy who signed off on the sweetheart deal that Alan Dershowitz negotiated for Epstein in 2008. Acosta says, I was told to lay off Epstein because he's with the intelligence services. Those are the words of Alex Acosta, apparently.
He wasn't told by me.
So, interestingly, whether he worked for the CIA or whether he worked for Mossad, and of course he had ties to Israel. He was best friends with Ehud Barak. He lived in Israel. He invested in Israeli companies.
Later.
Like he had ties to Israel. Like, I'm not saying he's in Mossad, but he definitely had ties to Israel.
Later.
And the administration should come out and clarify. The administration should clarify. Last point I'd make is this. We talked about Alan being a lawyer for Epstein, and he can choose who he wants to represent. But more than just being a lawyer, Alan was a friend of Epstein's and a friend of Ghislaine Maxwell, and went to the mansion and went on the plane. I'm not suggesting any wrongdoing, but I'm questioning Alan's judgment on this and many other issues.
Alan,
so the president of Harvard was a friend. Professors were friends. Bill Gates was a friend. Jeffrey Epstein attracted a great many people. He used to have these seminars. Nobody knew he was doing anything wrong. Nobody knew he was doing anything wrong. Once people found out he was accused of doing things wrong, they terminated their relationship with him, as I did. You can't